Welcome back. Winning Plays podcast. Rich Levine, Brian Robb. So it's Tuesday, B Rob. Monday night, perhaps a Monday night that will live in infamy, at least in terms of these Boston Celtics. Let's start in the third quarter last night. Boston Celtics, Chicago Bulls. Celtics are up 19 points with like 3 minutes left. And at this point, let's just say this. It was a pretty inspiring game to that point.
Sure.
It felt like at the very least, Celtics are moving up to going to improve to 3 and 4. Things are looking better. What happened? What happened in the roughly 15 minutes, the final 15 minutes? I know you rewatched the fourth. You took the bullet for most folks. You rewatched that fourth quarter. Just break it down, because we know the headlines are what Marcus Smart said about the Jays, and I think at this point enough dust has settled that we know that the Celtics didn't lose that game to the Bulls because Jayson and Jaylen were not passing the ball enough. But what happened? What actually did happen?
I mean, I think first and foremost, and I don't know if you could feel this in real time, but the transition defense for this team all year long has been bad, but it was just non-existent. And I'll have to say this too: the Bulls are really good. Like, the Bulls hit their shots. Zach LaVine, they threw pretty much everyone had a chance on him, and he made everyone look bad from the Celtics wing perspective. And when you have that, and you have DeRozan in a groove, and Vucevic out there, there's very little places to hide defensively in terms of, like, you think you stop one guy, but then you have two other guys that are going to hurt you. So the Celtics weren't getting back. They were missing shots, and they just were, and then they fouled a ton. So it was the perfect storm defensively of it. Just, I think, again, they missed 3 shots the whole quarter, Rich, Chicago. And then off of those, I think they got offensive rebounds on like 2 of those misses and end up in buckets.
And when you say the Celtics weren't getting back, like, were the Bulls were just running harder, running faster? They were pushing it, and because clearly speed isn't an issue when you're talking about Schroeder, when you're talking about Smart, you're talking about the Jays. They can certainly, even they're not necessarily fast players, they can keep up with just about anyone, not to the point where you're going to get run off the floor. So did it seem like an effort?
I think partially. Some plays were. Like, and it wasn't like a flat out, like, you're walking back or you're lollygagging, but like at the same time, the Bulls were motivating. The Bulls were, beating the Celtics to spots. And if you make a bad pass, or if you go for the offensive rebound too hard and you're suddenly left with 4-on-3, or even a 2-on-2 situation where it's like Levine versus Horford, it's like last night, that was game over. That was 2 points in the last 14 minutes of that game. And it just happened again and again. It was like the same old, script over and over. And unfortunately for Ime Udoka, like, this was, we thought this was supposed to be a defense first team. Is that fair to say, going into the season, that this was supposed to be the calling? Certainly, if you're going to play the personnel that they were playing last night, it needs to be a defense first team. And that has been far from that this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, right, and I think that's because you can talk about the Celtics within the pocket of that 15 minutes, right? Certainly, it was also a microcosm for much bigger issues, but like, what we saw last night, and I think that's why everyone. And I don't know if it's going to be like a turning point. I guess we'll find out. Like, if it is, it is. If it's not, it's not. Like, history will write itself. But like, it wasn't like they just had one bad quarter and blew this game. Like, this is just kind of becoming their identity. And when we say that, we say at this point, because the coach is different. I mean, at this point, the executive is different, but it's the Jays and Marcus Smart. Like, that's whose team we have seen now repeatedly blow these leads, not come to play. And that's where, I mean, that's where you got to throw the blame somewhere. I don't know how you break that up, but that is the common denominator in all these issues now, is those 3 guys. So, like, how do you get better?
And that's the fascinating part of it, because there is no easy path here. I mean, there are options for Udoka. There are different ways to handle the rotation, different ways to handle, the lineups that you're playing size-wise or personnel-wise, but it's still going to involve all those 3 guys in whatever form you take. And until that gets sorted out one way or another, from a, just a focused or an effort standpoint, or whatever, however you want to put it, we're seeing the same theme that kind of hurt this team last year over and over. And even going back to that Miami series 2 years ago, like, that's when they just would in those fourth quarter games, and you're like, and back then we were wondering like what's going on here, and now that's like you said, that's kind of becoming a calling card.
Right. And Jayson Tatum. I mean, I think that's just want to say the name. We can go from there. To me, that is the most disappointing thing because Marcus Smart is Marcus Smart. He's clearly the third banana in that group. Yeah, maybe he shouldn't have said what he said after the game, right? Or if he's gonna say it, if
Well,
he's gonna
but
say it, like say it in the locker room, right? Like
right,
because that's part of the problem is that the Celtics don't have that leader, that tough love leader
right.
who will tell guys what they don't want to hear when they need to hear it. Like certainly like the way he went about getting that across and we don't even know. I'm not sure how valid it is. Certainly in time, in certain spots, it is like. And to me, it falls more on Tatum because that's what we see. That's who has the ball more. And that when you look, that's when you look at the numbers, whether it's his fourth quarter numbers, whether it's his isolation numbers, whether it's a whole slew of the assists this year, the foul shots. Like to me, that's the head of the snake. If he's your best player, if Tatum, like we said at the beginning of the season, like we thought that maybe Tatum needs to get into the top 5 MVP conversation if the Celtics are going to do exceed expectations. And right now, like he's not even an All Star. So
No,
like that's where I mean, and you can talk about the attitude. You can talk about you can wonder how much does this guy. I don't want to go. This is so stupid. This is like the old tired tropes of how much does he really care. I do wonder sometimes, like, yeah, and not that he's not competitive, but like people compare him to Kobe. He certainly doesn't have that mentality. Um, I don't know. Like, where does it start? Like where if you could pick one spot where Jason Tatum needs to be better, where is it? What is it?
I mean, an easy choice is I mean, he's taking more threes than ever, and I think shooting like under 30% here. So that just that is one. Fourth quarter offense in general too is just like if you're going to take all these shots in at the end of these games, efficiency has to be there, and that's like you said, that's been on the far downturn this year. Looking back at his fourth quarter last night, it was not as bad as you would think. Like after seeing it in real time, when you look at the box score and you see 1 of 8, um, I don't think he got to the free throw line at all that whole quarter. I think the Celtics got there once on a Horford and one, but he made the right reads. He made the right plays on when there were doubles, there were triples, and there was guys in his airspace all night. But his inability to finish at the rim, and I think our buddy Mike Pina tweeted this out earlier, is that his rim rate this season, the amount of shots he's taking at the rim is 17%, which is his career average is 24. And so
Right.
that is not what you want. And he obviously isn't finishing well there when he does get there. And last night that wasn't the case for him. So I think that's where you start with him. He needs I'm honestly not super worried about like of the Celtics laundry list of issues here. He's on there, but I'm not super worried about him compared to other stuff. I feel like he's had slow starts before here, and the 3-point shooting, he has a track record there. So like I feel like he should come around here, but like to your point, this is the issues that the crunch time stuff and the fourth quarter stuff is there year after year. So when do you have to start looking at that as a bigger picture problem? I guess the time is now.
Yeah, and then it's funny. Like, you made such a big deal before the season. Like we don't want to be that team that's complaining to the refs. And at a certain point, like, and again, because we talk about Tatum not getting to the line as much as we'd like, he has like there are stretches where he is aggressive like that. Like I didn't think last night watching that game that I thought that he wasn't taking it to the hoop hard enough. Many times I didn't think it's not a matter of him not competing. There was that one stretch defensively where he had those 2 blocks. Like he got called for a foul on the second block. But like you see him up there like defending like at the rim, like competing on that level. But like there just seems to be a level, I don't know, like an intensity or focus or whatever it is that just seems different when it matters most where like he was one of those guys that it wasn't even that you expected him to carry the load when it mattered most. He did it. Like he was a guy who did seem to step into that moment when it was shining brightest, but that just seems like he just doesn't seem totally entirely present in all this. And and that can go many
And
different ways. Like again, winning changes a lot, but like right now, this is not the Jason Tatum that we have grown accustomed to.
I think the biggest worry with him, to your point, like defensively, late in these games, he was, he used to be an all. He has been an all-star defender in the past. He was in terms of losing Caruso for open threes, just like again the complaining to the ref there a couple of times where that cost the Celtics in transition, and he's they need him to be a difference maker in that on the floor. And whether it's stamina, like I think I don't know if you saw this tweet, like someone looked at his defensive numbers like post COVID, and they've fallen off since February of last year
Really?
compared to where they were before, and you wonder there of whether it's how much an impact that has in terms of he had breathing issues and things like that. I don't to read too much when he said kind of fine now, but when you look at him in these spots, he's like you said, he's a different player there, and when you have a team that's just gotten worse defensively, even though they should have on paper have improved the personnel on that side of the floor, that.
Yeah, no, it's scary. And then and I guess Jaylen is another guy who came out was the Jaylen that everyone's been begging for, in that first half especially. But then in that fourth quarter, everything falls apart. Now he's on the bench for a lot of it, and then when he does come back, it seems like he becomes an afterthought. And I remember Charlotte was the game where I saw that happen, and obviously they overcame it in that case. But he just they start off these games and there's this ball movement. It's so inspiring. We see these guys are playing together, and then we see over and over and over when it comes to the fourth quarter, it's Jayson Tatum. And I don't know if Jaylen needs to step in a little bit more, and if they have these tough conversations, and maybe that's on Ime. But again, this is a pattern.
So what did you like? Do you look at Tatum more, or do you look at the coaching there in that situation? Like with when these things come up, because we haven't talked about Ime Udoka yet. I think we should get to him. I think we should talk through smart comments a little bit more too. But like, this has been a rough start for and it's tough to judge him knowing that this is like track record that has been there. But like from a scheme standpoint on both ends in these spots, like it hasn't been great.
Yeah, I mean, we were saying who, Marcus or Jaylen or just in general?
In general.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I at first I'm not. You can't, like I said, Marcus and the Jays. I'm like Marcus and the Jays. The three of those guys, those are the players. Those are the guys who have the most power to affect these games, right? Like these guys, we've seen them do it before. We know they know how to do it. Ime, like there are different parts of Ime's. Because I have another question. Was Nesmith out again? Chicago? He just didn't play.
He just did not play. So that was a situation where he, again, 4 straight games he has not played, and he just is out of the rotation right now, straight up. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Those are the spots where, like, when you're looking for something that could ignite some sort of passion, some sort of just like just caring about the game. It's so like deflating to watch this current core of the Celtics do this every single night. Again, you have a guy like Nesmith who showed bright spots. And we're not saying that he's got the key to unlocking everything, but you're talking about little things that could come along and just change the path of a team when they need a little kick in the ass. Guys like that you see them just sitting on the bench. Like what? Like clearly, it's not like maybe you don't think that he's earned a spot in the rotation at this point. But when nothing else is working, and at the very least, he's a guy that seems like he's going to at least run hard and crash the boards and just make things happen by making things happen, by just being active and just wanting the ball. Like guys like that just piss me off to have someone like that just sitting on the bench when you see so many of your so-called stars and players just going through the motions. So those are spots where I can question Ime a little bit. Like he certainly hasn't inspired at all. Like his demeanor on the sidelines, and again, you can't. Brad very rarely showed emotion, right? So can't criticize Ime if I didn't criticize Brad. But I just don't get a sense for who he really is yet. I don't really feel like he's put his mark on this team. It's hard to argue otherwise because this very much seems like the same team that has frustrated the fan base for the last few years now, and just unexpected ways. And almost like I talked about, like when we opened this podcast, the first three quarters where it really seemed like that was going to be a trademark win against a really good Bulls team. So like, and then just like that, it disappears. Uh, it's just more frustrating when they show you what you know they can do. Like when
Yeah,
those first three quarters, when they're playing up to the expectations and just showing you, yeah, this is still here. It's still in us, right? If we just, and maybe some fans are ready to give up on this team. I think it's a little bit early. But like the reason you don't yet, the reason it hurts more to see the collapses like the fourth quarter is because you know that there's basketball like from like those first three quarters in there. You know,
100%.
like you know it's there. So it's like, but after time and time again, after showing you just pulling the rug out from under your feet, like I don't know what you're supposed to do. Like as a fan, as a writer, as a coach, at some point you want to say, hey, you guys know how to go out and win basketball games, but when it matters most, you're just not doing it for whatever reasons. And like, it's not up to us to figure that out. I mean, we can make all the speculation guesses that we want, but like, I don't know. Like, what would be if there was one big move that and so the next game is Orlando, which hopefully, I mean, that's next level if you lose that game. But if there's
Yeah.
one big move that
They're
you
looking
make,
pretty good, by the way. Like Cole Anthony and stuff, those guys, it's like that is not an easy. That's not a layup, which it looked like in the preseason would be.
no, I mean, yeah, I don't know what could classify as a layup with this team right now. But like if there's one big change that he could make, what would you like to see?
I think you just nailed it. I think you have to start getting the young guys in there for if you're email right now, like the Richardson, the Schroeders of the world. Like you can't. It's one thing to be 2-5. It's another thing to be 2-5, and you're not developing anything at the end of
Yeah,
your roster right
right.
now.
It-
It's like there's worst case scenario and then worst case scenario, which is where they're at from that standpoint. And so, like, you have to, in my mind, you know, you're worried about energy and effort. Like you said, bring in the guys that you're going to get that from. And it's tough with Pritchard. I mean, Pritchard hasn't been bad. Neesmith didn't hit a shot in his first three games. We've harped on this stuff, but the alternative very appealing. Josh Richardson has not done enough to be like, okay, he's a difference maker defensively. Like, let's roll with him. Like,
right. And
no,
again, we saw one glimpse. I think it was a Chicago game. Few glimpses of him playing some decent defense, like maybe hitting a few, but then he goes and the king of like stepping out of bounds, like, and sometimes you see the guys like back heel hit the out of bounds mark, like when he gets a pass, like Marcus does it all the time. I felt like
right,
that happened against the Bulls. Richardson's like whole foot was out, like it just seemed like he
right,
was so like out of sorts of like where he was and what he needed to do. And yeah, no, I agree with you. It's a double negative right now. Like right now, like I think the only two positives on the season are probably Al and Schroeder, guys who are probably playing just well enough to get
right.
more money somewhere else, to get more money than you want to pay him next year. You know, it's really been a mess. It's super unfortunate, and maybe this is just part of the journey for this team. Like maybe they need to just get this out of their system. And I know Ime made reference to maybe this being a learning, a chance to learn a few hard lessons about the NBA. But like this team has learned that lesson many times already.
Right. And you don't want to learn as a lottery team. And that's the direction you're going in right now. If you can't with all these, we don't think the Bulls and the Wizards of the world are going to be contending in the East, but if they build game lead over you in the first quarter of the season, like that's not going to be easy to make up when the schedule gets tougher here. And so the Celtics are losing a lot of winnable games, and it's a work in progress in terms of the personnel and things like that. But they don't have much more time to really get this figured out right now. So I want to get back to the Smart comments here because we haven't. I mean, we talked about them a little bit earlier, but in general, the what is Smart's mentality here? Do you feel like going into this? Because I mean, again, looking at the film, like, do you feel like when him saying that was that like a full season frustration thing? Was that
Maybe not even full season.
yeah,
Yeah,
or yeah, even like again, what the games he's appeared in?
many a season. Yeah.
But I mean, from my standpoint, it's like, okay, Marcus, you're shooting like 29% from the field this season. Your turnover rate is the highest of your career. I understand the tone of the comments to me was almost not talking down to those guys, but like saying he's the older, wiser player. Like, oh, these guys, we're trying to make them learn. Like, we're working with them. They don't want to pass. Like, give the ball to me. I'll take care of everything. Like, you, you're just as much part of the problem as these guys offensively right now. Like, and so for him, frame it that way. I understand. Like, if the offense is too predictable, like, yes, like mix it up. That's probably a conversation to have with the coach, or even, I don't even think you need to bring up Tatum and Brown in that instance. Just say the offense is too predictable. We need to mix it up for those guys. But for me, for him to go the route he went down, it, like, in my mind, might just, cause some damage here that, or reopen old wounds that could potentially lead him out the door, even after they just gave him a 4-year extension. I don't know.
No, I agree. I do. I thought that it was like it seemed very just like emotional, and that's Marcus, right? That's part of it. I think it was a guy who was probably embarrassed for not only what's happened to the team this season, but certainly what happened like in that one game, like, in front of their home crowd, getting booed off the court and just being embarrassed like that. And I think certainly it seemed like this is like, I don't know if you ever have like an argument with your partner, significant other, and
Never.
you're right. I know, and I feel like I've gotten a little bit better at voicing things as they come up, like as I've gotten older. But like when you're younger, sometimes, and like things just get pent up, or you get resentful about shit, and like you're in an argument, and you just bring up this other thing just out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
That might not even have that much to do necessarily with the fight argument at hand, but you just need to get it off your chest, and that it felt a little bit like that to me because, as you said, and as you pointed out, I know you tweeted about this a little bit, like maybe there are times when you can say, like, just in the big picture, maybe the Jays can pass a little bit more recently,
The end of
right?
that Wizards game, the overtime when they scored 3 points in the final 8 minutes of regulation,
Exactly.
like that's like, if you made this comment after those games, it'd be very hard to argue with them.
Right. It just sounds a little bit ridiculous when it comes in a game where again he himself has 0 assists as
Right.
as your starting point guard, and it would just, and again, from the start of the season, when it comes to the focus, like a guy who generally, aside from that the three that sent into the overtime in New York, and the defense in that Hornets game, has not played very well this year. Um, it just what again. And it's one thing if you say in the locker room, if you come in after a game pissed off, and maybe he did, and you say, guys, you need to, and then they could say, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? We were like, look at the tape, but you just don't express it the way he did. I'm sure he would take it back, though,
Yeah.
for it to come out the way he did. And were the Jays, were they supposed to talk to the media before that, and Marcus said that, and then they canceled, or
No.
was
The setup is usually it's 3 guys that talk after the game, and Smart was, just the first guy up, which, you never know what order they're going to come in, but that's him. Like, he's usually one of the first guys that talk out of the locker room when the locker room was open. And so he went, and then Horford went, who was again announced, and then it was supposed to be Jaylen, and Tatum wasn't supposed to talk at all last night. Like, he just, randomly, sometimes after, you'd think he's a guy who's going to talk every night regardless, but the Celtics, or he, they don't want to burn him out, and so he obviously, like, it was probably night everyone wanted to hear from him, but it was say, okay, well, we'll put Jaylen out there and not Tatum for this night for whatever reason. But then again, in the aftermath of the Smart comments, the announcement was made that Jaylen would not be talking, so it was just Al and Smart, and that's it. So and now the usual shoot around they have on Wednesday will not be happening. So we won't be hearing from any players until after the Magic game, which again, I imagine is a strategic play by the team to
yeah,
hopefully have better things to talk about by the
well
end of the
played.
Magic game.
But yeah, I'm sure again, it just wasn't. I agree with you, man. I don't know if Marcus is going to be long for here anymore. You can't. It's just that's just nice. Talk about winning plays. Talk about Marcus like that. That doesn't help the team. It really doesn't. There are ways to go about it that maybe it can, but like to come out and that way. And he knows what's going to happen when he says that. He's been around long enough to understand like the shitstorm that is going to create. And then you factor in the way he's played. Him missing the flight in preseason, and I know it's
Yeah.
like not a huge deal, but getting suspended for that. And you talk about a guy who seemed pretty close at some point in the preseason to being named captain, right? I'd heard there were whispers about that. I thought, right, that Ime had like the idea of maybe him and Al being named captains. I thought that was a story for a little bit, and then that shit happens, and now that we're a few weeks in, and it has been the worst of Marcus Smart in so many ways, and that was the low light of this season for all the poor basketball that he's played, aside from a few bright spots. And he was very good for in the beginning of that Bulls game as well. So we'll give him credit for that. But that comment, that's really, it just doesn't make things better.
Right. It's just something where you have to, and I looked at it, I mean, like when is, for all of, questionable shot selection over the years in certain games, like no one has ever on the team publicly has called him out for that. And
right.
He returns, not the return. I mean, again, like you said, this is something probably was pent up, and there was some validity to a lot of the stuff he said in terms of the predictability and like offensive flow, and wanting to take the onus off them. Like again, his intentions, I believe, were good for the most part, but the way it was put and the timing of it, and again, the messenger, him being the messenger for it, after a game like that where it was a true team loss, and a lot of what he said wasn't true for that final 13, 14 minutes. Like it just did not come across well.
It came across as selfish, and I know he never did say like I'm the one who should be shooting instead of these two. He seemed like he was maybe speaking for the rest of the team, and who knows if that's something that more than that not only that Marcus believes, but it just wasn't the right time, wasn't the right place, wasn't the right. And I would think that he would probably take that back. I hope that he would take it back if he had a chance. He's still learning. We're all still learning. It's just unfortunate. And again, like a lot of that comes down to the fact that I don't think the Celtics have that tough love veteran leader. Maybe that's when Jaylen talks about Ime and says he's one of us, right? Like maybe that's what he talks about. Maybe Ime has to be that guy, but Al Horford's not that guy. I don't know if Marcus Smart's necessarily good enough, or at least right now, to be that guy. It's not Jaylen, it's not Jayson. I don't get the sense. So who is it? That's a question the Celtics need to answer. I think if they're going to, at some point start getting closer to maybe contending again for a title.
Brad Stevens, Ime Udoka. This is a tough place for both those guys right now, and because I honestly nothing neither can really do. I mean, Ime can make tweaks now, but as far as shuffling the deck a little bit, that can't be done anyway for at least another couple months. So this is what it is right now, and so they're going to have to, navigating these waters is going to be a fascinating thing to watch in the next. Like, what do you want to, if you're Ime Udoka right now, like getting ready for this trip, like what are you, like who are you pulling aside, like how are you trying to handle the fallout from this, and just try to get these guys again back on a track for a tough 3-game road trip this week?
Yeah, I like to think you sit down with the three, with the Jays and Marcus, at the very least, right? Maybe you bring Al into the mix if he can, just help facilitate some of the conversation. I don't really know too much about his relationship with those guys, but you think that he would hope for all the credit, deserved or not, that Al gets for being a great locker room guy. Yet every single season he is. The Celtics, the Sixers, now the Celtics again, like finds himself in these dysfunctional locker rooms. You got to start at the top, I think, and let all the piss out. Say everything you need to say. Don't hold back. Get your top tier. All right. Maybe give a little bit more opportunity to some of your younger players. Maybe make this a little bit more of a team from top to bottom. Yeah, and just go from there. I want to say that it should be Brad's problem as much as it is Ime's, because let's look at Ime was Brad's hire. There wasn't a lot of conversation in the in the front office, right? Maybe there were with some of the owners, but the Ime hire was Brad Stevens'
Yeah, it's a stamp.
call. Yeah, it's not, but it wasn't. It wasn't even like, hey, let's all have a big meeting in the front office. Hey, Dave, Zarin, Austin, let's all sit down and talk about potential coaches and see who we want to hire. No, that was Brad Stevens saying Ime is the guy.
Yeah,
and maybe he had some input from Jaylen. We know he talked to Jaylen Brown about it. Like maybe the Jays nudged him a little bit on that level too. But like that when Ime was Brad's hire 98%. So he's got to be part of it, and I'd be very interested to know about the relationship between those two, Brad and Ime. I don't know. I don't think too much has been written on it yet, but just like, you know, how often are they texting each other late at night, thinking about how they're going to make this better? Is it? I wonder. They very well could, but like I do wonder, like, what if that's the case? What are they saying to each other? What are those conversations? Is it about the scheme? Is it saying like, dude, like, switching is not really working? Like, you know,
are you seeing this?
yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if you, and I'm sure maybe that has been inspired some by what Danny and Brad's relationship was. I'm sure, you know, Brad learns how to be an NBA executive, you know, from the way Danny treated him. So maybe that's part of it. But they got their work cut out for him. That's for sure.
I wonder what the text versus call situation like the main form of communication, or if it's just next day in the office.
Yeah, right. He just like moseys into the office. Yeah,
it's being like, what do we have here? What just happened? But it's.
Has Brad been at these games at all? Does anyone see him?
He has. I've seen him at a couple games. I didn't not see him last night, but he has been, you know, around before the game for at least one or two. He has very much tried to be out of sight at, you know, he's been around a couple of them, but
is he up there, like up there in his office, or
yeah, like or just on the court, like off to the side, but very much, you know, he has not, you know, spoken to the media at all outside of his weekly radio appearance on Touch and Rich, filling, you know, taking Danny's spot there. But that's been it. He's understandably so has tried to stay out of, you know, spot like this, you know, let Ime do his thing. It's his show. But now you wonder with this, like what comes of this?
And yeah, I say right. You say it's his show, but it's not. I mean, Brad gave Ime his players.
Right.
Like I think now that the show is going haywire, and maybe now is when you step up and take a little of the blow. It takes some pressure off your first time, not even first year, like a first time head coach. You know, like you've been in through the fire a few more times. Like take some of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like you can come out of hiding, and they're touching Rich. I love they're touching Rich. Those guys are great. Like, are they asking hard questions to him?
They do. I will give them credit. Like they go, you know, they don't hold back.
That's
for
good.
a lot of these interviews. So that's good. I mean, it's so he'll get real questions on there. You know, assuming he's on there later this week. But you're right. Like this is, you know, I think Danny Ainge did this a lot when he was on. He'd come out and take the hits.
Yeah.
When it's called for it, and this is, you know, certainly a situation where, especially if the losing continues this week, that could very much be in order, because there's gonna be nothing else to distract from it right now. Like Red Sox are done.
Yeah.
You know, Bruins, you know, Pats are okay, but you know, there's not a lot of hoopla around this. So this is the story right now in the region in terms of.
And this would be the time when Danny Ainge would call up Steve Bulpett and feed him the information that, you know, just something to, not to take the attention away, but maybe just show support. So this is where Stevens needs to call Brian Robb and say, get my story out there.
And say, stop writing crappy articles.
Yes. But yeah, so I would love to see Brad come out and take let's say responsibility, but just be a little bit more present. That's my message for the entire organization. Be more present through this disaster, and maybe everyone can get through it. So what's your prediction? So we have Saturday. Oh no, my days are really messed up. So Wednesday is Orlando, Thursday is Miami,
Saturday,
and then
Dallas.
Saturday is Dallas.
Yeah, I'll be there for that one.
You'll be in Dallas. That's pretty cool. So what's the? Is there any chance at 2-1?
Ugh.
I think so.
Yes, because Jayson Kidd's involved. So yes.
Eh,
I think that's the equalizer there. But yeah, obviously Orlando, the back-to-back against Miami. Miami looks like they're in 50 games through the season mode already. They're locked in.
peaking
So
too early, while the
right,
Celtics are
I mean,
just biding their time to start trying on the
and
season.
there'll probably be a triple overtime and game involved in the next week too. That they'll burn out
Probably
a little bit
Orlando.
more. Probably Orlando. Yeah, I'm going 1-2. No, I'm going to. I'm going to go 2-1. I'm going to say
2-1.
that Jayson Kidd, messes something up on Saturday night, and they come home with at least some feelings of good vibes after a miserable first week or first 2 weeks. What do you have?
What about a Dallas Miami 2-1?
That would be
the
wild.
story.
That would be the ultimate wild.
That'd be the total mind fuck. And you know what? Give it to this team. Leave it to this team to do that. I'm gonna say that 2-1. They're gonna lose to Orlando. And then beat Miami and Dallas.
All right. But we'll be back to recap this road trip next week and see what else. Who knows? Maybe they make us talk again this week if we have, if Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum talks after one of these next 2 games. That'll be the interesting. We can talk much about that. I'll be very curious to see how that is responded to publicly by that group. But in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter at Rich_Levine. I'm at Brian T. Robb. We're at Winning Plays Pod. Rate, review. Find us on iTunes, Spotify, all that good stuff, YouTube. And thanks for listening as always. And we'll talk to you guys next week.